I can't believe that I'm making a video on fucking flowers. Flowers seem to represent a lot of symbolism. Not sure why, honestly, but they do. Bosses being fought in or near flowers are nothing new for video games, but they seem to be a staple for From Software games. When flowers are nearby, a great boss fight is in store. Right? Usually people think so, and they have a bit of a point, but it's not always the case. There may be some symbolism in the use of flowers, but this is mostly just a boss analysis video. Or an attempt at one. I'll also be trying to figure out if a boss being in or near flowers is a signifier that they're brutally difficult. And, of course, there'll be spoilers for pretty much all the most recent From Software games, excluding Demon's Souls and Dark Souls 2. Those games being... Let's talk about the most obvious ones first. Gehrman is the first notable fight in this series that has you fight in a field of flowers. If you deny his offer to leave the dream, he takes up his weapon and fights you.
Tonight, Gehrman joins the hunt.
Despite its size, his scythe attacks are fairly quick and cover a decent amount of range. His attacks are the standard fare for a scythe, with big swipes and attacks to draw you in closer to him. He can also freely switch to a blade mode that, while covering less range, is even faster. Gehrman also has a habit of jumping and dashing around the arena very fast, so he can avoid your attacks or be right up in your face in an instant. He even has a custom gun that hits for a good amount of damage and can stagger you, allowing him to visceral attack you. He does have more than one phase as well. Phase 2 will give him stronger and faster attacks, and Phase 3 gives him a dodge that's better than yours, and gives him a couple of super moves, namely an explosion and aerial jumping slash attack. What makes him truly difficult, though, is that he acts like how a player would, predicting what you're going to do while also making sure he has the advantage. It's a PvP match against AI, essentially. So he has smart AI while also having moves that only a boss would. All of this, and we get both a beautiful score and beautiful arena fight in. And this would set a bit of a trend for bosses in the series. Rightfully so, too, since Gehrman is not only one of the best bosses in the game, but also just a terrific boss fight in general. It's also a sad fight. Gehrman is sick of being in the Hunter's dream, but always offers Hunters the chance to leave, while he stays behind. So you refusing him is him trying to free you no matter the cost. Meanwhile, the player is more aware of Gehrman's situation, and is trying to kill him to free him from it as well. So it's a boss fight where both parties are only trying to grant each other mercy from a nightmare and there's no animosity. This fight is so good on so many levels. There is another fight in this arena, but I'll quickly mention that later. Soul of Cinder is the next major boss. While the flowers in the arena aren't as abundant, there are still plenty, and the arena is beautiful in a disastrous way. The eclipse burning in the sky with a lone warrior sitting in a field of ash and flowers. This is the Soul of Cinder, and it is interesting in two ways. In its first phase, it plays like you in a similar way to Gehrman, but might have attacks and spells that you don't. Essentially, the Soul of Cinder is the culmination of all the people who have linked the flame, i.e. all of the players of Dark Souls combined into one boss. It starts off with just sword attacks, but then it can transition to multiple styles, such as lance, magic, scimitar, etc. The boss can be difficult if you don't have good countermeasures, but what really makes this fight hard is Phase 2. Some familiar piano music starts to play, and you are facing Gwyn again, except he is much tougher by the fact that you can't parry spam him, and he can now combo you. He also has more attacks, and his attacks have more range and strength this time around, which is a given since Dark Souls 3 made it a habit to give bosses a ton of moves in comparison to Dark Souls 1. It makes sense thematically too. If you fought all the people who have linked the flame over the years, you'd have to fight the one who linked it first as well. So far that's two sad bosses fighting in a field of flowers. Let's see how that progresses. Isshin the Sword Saint is next, and this is where I feel the whole flowers equals tough boss thing came from. I mean, he is the guy who almost single-handedly prevented Ashina from the unification of Japan that was happening, so you'd bet he'd be tough. Technically, you also fight Genichiro in this field twice, but the 2 to 3 times you fight him seem more for story than challenge, until New Game Plus. You're supposed to lose the first time, and the third time he is a joke compared to you. The only real challenge he provides in the third fight is being another obstacle to fight Ishin, basically giving the boss fight 4 phases. Ishin, on the other hand, is anything but a pushover. Also, for me personally, he is the hardest mandatory boss fight I've ever faced in my years of gaming. His first phase is a test of all the basic sword skills you have learned throughout the game. He also has special moves that you've learned, so it's a test to see if you can handle what you dish out. He does have some of his own special moves too, so it's also adapting to those. Despite how simple it sounds, he can move around extremely fast, attack just as fast, and has some special moves that cover a huge amount of horizontal or vertical space. His normal attacks aren't usually the issue, it's his speed and his special attacks that make Phase 1 hard on its own. Then in Phase 2, the Sword Saint, famed for his incredible skills with a sword, now fights you with a spear as well. Really living up to the name. So not only does he have his fast sword attacks with long-range special attacks, he now has normal attacks with more range just in his normal combos, thanks to the spear, and he can move it almost as fast as his sword. It is slightly slower, so openings can be found, and doesn't have any special moves to deal with, so silver lining, I guess. Also, I love how he just stomps it to surface level out of nowhere.
For his neutral special, he wields a gun.
It fires 4 shots in rapid succession, and he can shoot it at almost any time he wants, which can catch you off guard and destroy you if you're not prepared. Oh, and he still has the sword during all of this if that wasn't made clear earlier. So with all of these as a factor, Phase 2, in my opinion, is his hardest phase. Then in Phase 3, while majority of his Phase 2 moveset stays the same, he gains 2 new moves. 2 vertical slash projectiles, and Tomoe lightning attacks. The lightning attacks make this fight the easiest of the phases, in my opinion. You got used to his Phase 2 skills, so it's just a matter of continuing to do what you were doing, while also making sure to reflect lightning back at him since it'll take out a good chunk of his health, poise, and it'll stun him for a bit. It has a large range, which makes it easier to deflect it, although it also makes it easier to miss, thereby leaving you open to attack. And yeah, should you completely die at any point in the fight, it's back to the very beginning fighting Genichiro again. So between the 3, technically 4-phased fight, all the tools at his disposal, and his ever-changing moveset, Ishin is definitely a strong candidate for the idea that bosses fought in flowers are really hard. Also, the weather changing throughout the fight is a nice cinematic touch, going from a night sky to the sky turning a bit red to a thunderstorm. Really sets the ambiance of the 16th century sodomy you're about to endure. The next boss is Godric, which already debunks the idea that every boss in a From Software Soulsborne game in or near Flowers is incredibly tough, but I'll touch on that a bit later. Canonically, he is stated to be the weakest of the demigods, and he is the first one that most players are likely to face off against, so that doesn't give off a good first impression. This shows in his boss fight intro, where he is boastful and commands you to kneel, and in Phase 2, he wants his forefathers to his power. Most of the other demigods either hate you, don't pay you any mind, or go, "What's up?" But he makes it a point to demean you. He's looking for approval and proof that he is powerful. He's still a FromSoft boss though, so he's not a cakewalk, so let's delve into the actual fight now. He primarily attacks with his 2 axes, and the speed of his swings are a fair speed, but the windup for them can take a bit, which can throw you for a loop and cause you to mistime your dodges. He can also surround himself with wind currents and then attack you or launch said wind currents after you. His ground attacks have decent range and does decent damage too. Then in Phase 2, he cuts off his own hand and grafts... Wait, I thought grafting was a surgical procedure, not a magical one. In any case, he grasps the head of a dragon onto his hand, and now has many more moves at his disposal. His axe attacks stay the same, but his wind attacks also now have fire damage on them. His main new gimmick is the dragon, which gives Godric more range and power due to the dragon's fire breath. He has a standard flamethrower, a large AoE of fire spewing around him, and a grab attack. While still a good fight and epic as all hell, this is where we're starting to see cracks in this flower theory. While he has a large moveset of attacks, it can still be tricky for people learning the game, he's still not all that difficult. The boss before him, Margit, is harder than him. The long wind-up from melee attacks and the long reach of his fire attacks are the difficult things to handle, and even then it doesn't take too long to adjust to them. The rest of his moveset is difficult, but fair. Despite the flowers in the arena and the epic music, Godric isn't all that tough.
I am the Lord of all that is golden. One day, we'll return together to our home, bathed in rays of gold.
And finally, the last of the main flower bosses and the most recent, Malenia.
Blade of Miquella.
She is the complete opposite of Godric in almost every regard, and a strong contender for this dumb flower thing I'm talking about. She's much more reserved with a smaller frame and is actually incredibly difficult. You enter her arena, she states who she is and that she has never lost a fight in her life. Then she rushes you before you can process that the fight began. Most of her attacks are actually straightforward. She has a couple of basic swipes, a launcher, and a follow-up slam, a stinger, a sweep kick, a fast 3-hit combo, and a decent dodge to give her some space. These attacks aren't the flashiest, but they are effective and not too difficult. There are at least 3 problems with this fight though. The first is that she is incredibly aggressive. She doesn't have too many openings due to how aggressive she is, giving you very little time to counterattack, which can make the fight drag even if you are also aggressive. Second, she can heal every time she hits you, even if you have a shield up, so your progress can be undone if she hits you too often. And lastly, she has a move called Waterfowl Dance, in which she pretty much does anime-style slashes that encompass her entire body, and it is very damaging, she very nearly tracks you, and she'll heal a shit ton of health from it. Honestly, it's the dance for me that is always the hardest part to deal with. I didn't have a great build, and her moveset and healing wasn't the issue. It was the dance. Yes, I suck at these games, doesn't stop me from playing them and liking them. There are ways around it, but require stupidly strong defenses or perfect dodge timing, stuff I did not have when fighting her. Thankfully, she does have very low poise, so she can be stunned fairly easily, and she is very susceptible to bleed, and her attacks are well telegraphed, so you're never really caught off guard by majority of her attacks. This is a very hard fight, but it's not even the whole fight, as she does have a phase 2 that is harder. It's also the only time where a woman stripping in front of me was scary and not sexy. First off, she has all her moves from phase 1, healing and dance included. Now though, while her poise is still low, it's not as low as phase 1, so she staggers less. She has 3 more super attacks in addition to the dance now, and they all inflict Scarlet Rot, including the dance. Yeah, if the tracking damage and healing wasn't enough, Waterfowl Dance now also has Scarlet Rot. Anyway, she has a slam attack that is easy to avoid, but if you try to punish it too fast, you'll get hit by Rot. She has a move where she jumps in the air, sends Rot clones out to attack you, and then does an air stinger to you. The clones come out very fast, but if you either time your dodges well or just run like a bitch and then dodge at the end, it's not too hard to handle. Then there's her final new super move that she always starts phase 2 on, in which she is up in the air and slams down with a rot flower forming around her, only for it to bloom. The flower does insane damage if she hits you directly, and the petals contain rot, so you can't just rush into attack her. This is also when she is her most vulnerable, since it's not a difficult attack to avoid. If you have any strong ranged attacks or magic, she is defenseless for at least 10 seconds. If you have none, though, well, you'll just have to wait until the petals go away. Despite the fact that it took me nearly 5 hours to be here, and despite a ton of people hating her, I thought the fight was fun, probably my favorite boss in the game. I can't deny, though, that she is a strong contender for the idea that From Software bosses in or near flowers are incredibly difficult. So yeah, a decent amount of tough and or memorable bosses are in or around flowers in this series. However, it's not like every single boss in the series next to flowers is memorable, or even good. Godric is a memorable boss despite his flaws, but are we really going to say the likes of Moonlight, Butterfly, Curse, Rotted Greatwood, and the Celestial Emissary are amazing bosses to define what Souls games are like? And even so, some bosses that are in Fields of Flowers can be just fine, like Sif and Moon Presence. Not bad fights, but more lore important than difficult fights despite their battle arenas. Besides, it's not like only the best bosses are in Fields of Flowers, unless you consider the corpses and bloody water in Ludwig's fight to be flowers. Yeah, the likes of Ludwig, Artorias, Gascoigne, Lady Maria, Gale, and Midir are all fantastic bosses in their own rights, and none of them are fought in or near flowers. Instead, they have much more varied and interesting battle arenas. Ishin himself has a completely different boss fight that is in a completely different location, and the boss fight is still great in its own ways. Hell, Sekiro has a ton of mini-bosses near flowers, and nobody's making analysis or rage videos on them. It's Sengoku Japan, of course there'd be flowers everywhere. Doesn't mean the enemy near it is fantastic. Hell, Elden Ring has literal flower bosses, and they suck. Goddamn poison and cramped space bullshit. So yeah, while there is some merit to how if a boss in a Soulsborne game is next to flowers, it may be a fucking tough fight, it's not foolproof. It's more like there's a chance it'll be hard, but not a guarantee. Oh, wait, I forgot to mention the absolute toughest boss in the Soulsborne series that is in a Field of Flowers. Doja Cat. I'll also be trying to figure out if a boss being in or near flowers is a significant. What makes him truly difficult, though, is that he acts like how a player would. Predicting. God fucking big words. Technically, you also fight Genichiro in the field twice, but the two of the three... You know, I'm looking over the script, like, you know, just checking it over for errors and just to record. I realized that, like, most of this video is going to be just two bosses, because, like, some of them are just kind of really quick, but I feel like the brunt of this video, I haven't gotten to editing yet, but I feel like the brunt of this video is going to be mostly just Ishin and Malenia. Like, that's what most of this video is going to cover, is just those two, apparently, which I guess makes sense, because the ones I spent the most time on, Ishin was, like, 4.5 hours, Malenia was almost 5, so it makes sense they're, like, the longest, and I had the most, like, idea how the fight goes, compared to other ones that are, like, a little easier, but just, like, this is going to be a tough video because of how long just two boss sections are in comparison. If I had short one, this would be a short video for Ishin and Malenia, honestly. I don't know how long this is going to be, but we'll see how this goes. Okay, let me try this again. Then in Phase 3, while a majority of this... Then in Phase 3, while majority of his Phase... Fuck! Then in Phase 3, while majority of his Phase... Oh my god! What the fuck?! However, it's not like every single boss in the series next to Flowers is memorable, or even good. Godric is memorable to...